What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. We're back doing another preview video for the Rugby World Cup. This one, we're moving over to Pool C, Australia versus Georgia. Another game that's maybe flying under some people's radars because there's a lot of big games going on this weekend, but this one's certainly tough. Pool C is a tough old pool, and Georgia went up against Scotland in the warm-ups. They put them under some real pressure in that first half, went in the lead, 6-0 down. Georgia are absolutely a team you can't just write off. As you talk to Scotland, you talk to Wales from last November, Georgia can become really, really competitive, and if you give them the in, they'll try and snipe a game or two. Could be one of the upsets to maybe look at for this World Cup. We've already done the preview videos for France versus New Zealand and Ireland versus Romania. You can go check those ones out if you haven't already. Of course, we're going to have a run through the team sheets that have been announced to play in this one for both sides. We'll have a run through the players, through some good picks, some bad picks, some thoughts about how the game might go, and give my initial reaction to the teams that have been announced. If you enjoy this style of video, make sure to drop the video a like and make sure to hit that subscribe button. Show your support for the smaller content creators on YouTube because it really is appreciated. So, starting out with the team represented as the home team in this one, Australia. Now, Australia have had a tough run of games, let's put it that way. Eddie Jones took over as the head coach. We thought maybe this would revitalize the team, something brand new. Hasn't really panned out that way. They've had a really tough run of games. They've lost every single game since Eddie Jones has taken over. They had some really tough competitors going up against in the Rugby Championship, as well as carrying on through those World Cup warm-ups leading up to that loss against France in their final game. But Australia will be hoping this can be maybe the game that can that turn it round for them. So starting out in this front row, Angus Bell, David Parecki and Taniela Tupou. Now Angus Bell has been one of the big names sort of standing out in this Australian team for me. You know, James Slipper was always there, really high caps, very experienced player, taking over the captaincy. And sometimes maybe it sort of goes to show that, you know, experience and caps can sometimes outweigh players that are actually in form. Angus Bell's been one of the real standouts in an Australian team for me. I think he's been doing very well, so very, very glad to see him starting out in this front row. And Georgia, they're a formidable pack when it comes to the forwards. They all look to get involved with the scrums. I think this is probably the right way to go. They've loaded up on quite a lot of weight here in terms of the Australian front row, so hopefully there'll be some big scrummaging in this game. In the lock department, Richie Arnold goes in alongside of Will Skelton, who of course got named as captain for this squad going out to France, which took a couple of people by surprise. But he is a giant man in that lock department. Maybe with such a a forward-focused pack from Georgia, where they try and get involved in the scrummaging. Lineouts may be one area that you can really sort of put a lot of pressure on for Georgia. You chuck Will Skelton with that front row jumper, and you've got to chuck the ball over the top of this giant guy. Really, really tough ask for the Georgian hooker. In the back row, Tom Hooper, Fraser McWright, and Rob Valentini, who seems to be the three that they're really focusing on now. They've got a couple of other names that sort of interchange here and there, but Tom Hooper has had his, rise back up from the ashes from his terrible debut that he had, where he got taken off in that first 30 minutes, and he's gradually been making more and more improvements. He's starting to sort of land now, that blindside flanker. Still no Judd Holloway in there, who is a player I rate quite highly, but Tom Hooper, quite a physical player, as well as Fraser McWright, actually. In fact, all three of them are up for some big ball carrying, actually, between the three of them. Maybe Australia are really going to be focusing in this game in just terms of holding on to the ball and actually carrying it a lot more rather than giving the ball back to Georgia. They probably saw what happened in that Georgia-Scotland game, where Georgia were allowed to sort of dictate the pace of the game and how it wanted to be played. I wouldn't be surprised if Eddie Jones wants to avoid that completely. Maybe just hold on to the ball yourselves and just go through some big carries to put the Georgian defensive line under pressure, and then maybe as the game gets on, as we sort of saw in that Scotland game, fatigue begins to kick in. Maybe that's where Australia really begin to exploit it and chuck the backs into the game a little bit more. In the halfback partnership, Tate McDermott goes in once again alongside of Carter Gordon, who I've sort of mentioned his kicking hasn't really been up to scratch. Now, we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to the end of this team, because I think there's some talking points around this. In the centre partnership, Samu Kerevi goes back in alongside of Jordi Pataya. Now, it was Focchetti, right, who played against France in that inside centre. Nice to see Kerevi back. From reading a couple things about Kerevi going back in, it seems like there's still quite a bit of worry about whether he's actually fully fit for this game, or whether he's just being thrown in the deep end. But he's a bit of a vital player for this Australian team in that centre partnership. He's a very, very, talented player at a lot of different things. He offers quite a good skill set. He's good with carrying the ball in hand. He's also good at the boot as well. So sometimes if your number 10 gets wrapped up into a ruck or what have you, having someone like Karevi there to step in that kicking duties and just kick you clear outside of your 22 gives you another option. And then finally in the back three, the return of Marika Koriobetti going on the left wing. Mark Nawaganita-Wase is going to be on the right wing, and Ben Donaldson starting at fullback. So let's start out, because there's a lot to go over here. Koriobetti coming back in on the left wing. We did see Vunivalu against France. Second game, second yellow card. Did get his try. I mean, there's a bonus for you, but I just don't think he's anywhere near the level of having Koriobetti on that left wing. Ben Donaldson taking over at fullback. One that did surprise me, because Andrew Kellaway is fit, he's ready to go, he's up for this game, and not even named in this side. Now Ben Donaldson coming in, I think it's going to be a big choice here, and the reason why I think this has probably been made, Carter Gordon's kicking, not great. Not great towards post. He's not helping him score points. And in Pool C in particular, with a lot of very tough games that might come down to one score, getting points on the board through penalties or just needing to kick your conversions is so important. Now, Ben Donaldson can play fly half or fullback. And I believe is also, more than capable of wars, can get post. So I'm guessing the move they're going for here is Carter Gordon to be the playmaker 10, but Ben Donaldson will be taking over the kicking duties, which to me is a smart move. I still rate Andrew Kellaway very highly as a good player, but this might be the better tactical decision just to try and ensure you're getting the win in this game. I think Australia would want to come away from this one with the bonus points for the tries, but if it's not going to go that way, you need to be slamming on those kicking points just to make sure you're absolutely going to win the game. That is the minimum you need to come away from in this one, because Wales and Fiji, as well as this pool as Australia, it's going to be awfully tight, I think, by the time we get to the end of it. And then quickly, in terms of the substitutions, Fassler, Shoop and Nongol will be the replacement front row. Robert, Leota and Langi Gleeson will be your replacement forwards. Nick White, Foketi and Vunivalu coming on from that bench as your replacement backs. Now it's sort of hand in hand with that Australian team. The Australian team that got named to go out to France, I was already sort of like, I don't think this is necessarily the strongest Australian team that there is available to them. I'm not 100% set on that front row. That replacement front row, we'll see how that gets on. Maybe they're hoping a bit of tired Georgian players. Maybe they can still make a nice impact. Rob Leota and Gleeson are two players who are going to carry the ball hard. It's sort of showing to me they're going to want to keep the ball in hand. They're going to go through some big charges. They've got big ball carriers across this team, so I imagine Australia are going to want to hold onto the ball more often than not in this one. Vunivalu, I'm still not set on in terms of his international jersey. He hasn't really impressed me that much yet. I think there's better wingers. I think the two lads starting, you keep on for the entire game. I would even rather have Andrew Kellaway come on that wing as well rather than Vunivalu. So the bench for me is a bit 50-50, but the 1 to 15, I still think that's a good an Australia side, and maybe they'll be hoping that they can sort of avoid what happened to Scotland going up against Georgia, and they can have a stronger first half, and then you just bring on those lads a little bit later in the second half. In terms of the Georgian team then, a lot of changes. And this one came as quite surprising, because I thought that first half going up against Scotland actually looked really dominant. I thought they were playing really well, and it just sort of slipped away from them in that second half. They lost control of the game, and Scotland began to run away with it. They've made some big changes, though. In fact, in the forward pack of the front eight, Mamoukiashvili and Mikotadze are, I believe, the only two players who are retaining their same shirt positions. Jagiellonia, hopefully I'm getting that pronunciation sort of correct, has moved from the number 8 shirt. He's moved into blindside flanker for this week, but only 2 players keeping their shirt numbers, going from that game against Scotland into this one. So some big switches here, and a couple of new names for me along the way. Not a big knowledge base for Georgian rugby, as some of you might know, but Gorgadze going in that number 8 shirt is a big bolster to this Georgian team. So I'm glad to see him coming back into this side now. The backs for Georgia, though, unchanged from that game that went up against Scotland. So they've obviously thought that the backs had a good enough game the way they were playing the game. We saw those kicks that were going on, really pinning Scotland back. Some lovely work by them, and they've obviously impressed enough that they've kept the same back line, but the forwards are the ones that are changes. So Lobjanidze and Matt Carver will be retaining that halfback partnership. Sharakadze and Tepladze retaining in the centre partnership, with Sharakadze as captain once again. Moravadze and Tapuzadze goes back in alongside of Niniashvili for the back three, and Niniashvili against Scotland actually had a a superb game. I was really glad to see how well he was playing. So the backs all staying the same for this game. Might show a bit of intent. The only thing that I'm a little bit worried about is so much control from that game from Georgia came from the boot and pinning Scotland back and then rushing up on Scotland. I feel like Australia's game plan is actually going to be more in line with holding on to the ball. So kicking it back to them might actually come back to bite Georgia this one. We'll have to see how it gets on. In terms of the replacements then, there's a lot of new names for me there. Gigiashvili be coming on in that second half in that replacement front row. Aprazidze and Avjanzadze as your halfback replacements as well. They're experienced players. They'll be coming on in that second half just to try and keep that ship steady. They'll be very annoyed probably at what happened in that Scotland game with how much it began to get away from them in that second half. It really felt like they lost control of that one. So going up against Australia, they'll be hoping that they can just keep that longevity in the game, which, Georgia can do. They've shown it before. They can play that full 80 minutes, but they just can't afford for that scoreboard to get away from them a little bit too much and the pressure begin to mount up. In terms of a score prediction for this one, I'm still backing Australia for this one. There's a lot of changes in that forward 8-pack for Georgia going into this one. I think Australia have made some good changes. Actually, Karevi coming back into a good move. Ben Donaldson, I think, is coming in order to just improve that kicking towards the post. So I think there's probably some good points for them. I'm not sure if Australia go for the 4 tries in this one. I'm sure if it arises, they'll absolutely take those opportunities. I wouldn't be surprised in this first half if they'll be, kicking towards the post, get Ben Donaldson in with some kicks, take any penalties you can, get those early 3 points on the board, just get your scoreboard ticking away a little bit, and then maybe in that second half when Georgia begins to tire out a little bit more, that's where you unleash some of your backs. Do I think they'll get to 4 tries? Maybe by the end of the game. There's certainly some big try scorers in that Australian team. But in terms of an actual score prediction, I'm going to say Australia to take this one by... I'm going to go with 18. That's going to be my prediction, guys. Make sure you drop down in the comment section your predictions along with your own thoughts on the teams that have been announced. Make sure you get your score predictions up on Super Brew along with your fantasy teams, because there's going to be a bit of a rush now as we get towards Friday and all the teams getting announced to get our fantasy teams sorted. I hope you've all enjoyed this one today, guys. I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.